We start with a Fox News alert. President Trump ready to strike a deal to protect hundreds of thousands of so-called dreamers, young people brought here illegally by their parents. But not unless Democrats go along with the president's wish list on immigration reform, and that includes a wall. Good morning to you. I'm John Scott.
Another busy day. I'm Melissa Francis. President Trump looking to that deal to sweeping immigration reform, sending Congress a 70-point plan, which includes the wall, as John mentioned, and thousands of additional ICE agents. Kellyanne Conway detailing some of that earlier on Fox and Friends.
Deals with DACA, which of course is on the minds of many Democrats and some Republicans, but it also deals with the president's first priorities, which is to keep us all safe and secure. It would have 300 new immigration judges, 1,000 ICE agents, because one of the major challenges we still have is what to do with folks who are trying to cross the border illegally.
Kristen Fisher is live at the White House with the details. Kristen, what do we know so far?
Well, Melissa, these demands are very different from the list of demands that Chuck and Nancy thought that they had agreed to when they had dinner here at the White House a few weeks ago. As one White House official put it last night, that was simply a deal to work out a deal, and that deal is now in serious jeopardy after the list of non-negotiables that President Trump sent to Congress last night. He wants Congress to pass a bill that would fund and complete construction of his border wall, a bill that would stop sanctuary cities by federal funding, hire 10,000 additional ICE agents and 600 prosecutors, end asylum abuse and chain migration, and establish a point-based system for green cards. The president says, quote, these findings outline reforms that must be included as part of any legislation addressing the status of DACA. So President Trump is now explicitly tying the fate of the Dreamers bill to several hardline immigration policies, and the top two Democrats say that is the exact opposite of what they believe that they had agreed to when they sat down for Chinese food with President Trump here at the White House a few weeks ago. So they put out a joint statement last night that reads in part, quote, we told the president at our meeting that we were open to reasonable border security measures alongside the DREAM Act, but this list goes far beyond what is reasonable. This proposal fails to represent any attempt at compromise. So this is bad news for the Dreamers, bad news for the roughly 700,000 young people who are now facing possible deportation, but very good news for President Trump's base and his supporters, who were starting to get a little concerned that the president might be backing away from one of his signature campaign promises. Now, Melissa, it is very clear, building the wall and completely building the wall and securing funding for it from Congress, now a top priority once again for this administration.
Although with all those points, that's a lot of room for negotiation, so it'll definitely be an interesting one to watch. Kristen, thank you.
Thank you.
So Kellyanne Conway making it clear President Trump is willing to protect those dreamers while also making major changes to immigration law at the same time.
The message to the Dreamers is that, listen to what the president says. He says he's open to a deal, open to figuring out a way to have a broader immigration policy that certainly addresses DACA, the so-called Dreamer program, but along with all these other critical functions.
Let's bring in Joe Trippi, former campaign manager for Howard Dean and a Fox News contributor. Also, Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. Good morning to both of you on this Monday. So, Joe, there is a carrot and stick approach here for the Congress. What do you think of it?
Well, I think on a number of those things, like the border wall, it's not clear that the president will have Republican votes, enough Republican votes in the Senate to pass some of the things that are of his demands. It's much more likely that a compromise will happen in Congress between the Republicans and the Democrats and send a bill to the president's desk that isn't likely to have all these demands in it. He'll have to decide whether he signs whatever the outcome is or veto it. But I think that's much more likely than this proposal passing and even having enough Republican support to pass it.
There are some tough methods in here, Joe. The president wants to build the wall, obviously, wants to crack down on illegal people, people who overstay their visas illegally. Lots of crackdowns in exchange for perhaps some action on the so-called dreamers. Will Congress go for it?
Again, I think the wall is a non-starter for all the Democrats and probably some of the Republicans. Again, a lot of it on the Republican side because of the costs and because there are better ways to do it. And so you just start there, and you already have this situation. The president needs almost every Republican senator he has. He's picked another fight with another one of them, Senator Corker. So how to put all those enough votes together with these demands, I think, is going to be a real problem. I'm not saying there won't be progress, that there won't be some kind of passage in the House and the Senate that arrives on the president's desk, but I think it's highly unlikely that there's going to be enough support for something with these kind of demands and hardline stances.
But Brad, this is one of the signature issues that got him elected to the Oval Office.
It is, but it's not only a signature issue of the president. This is a signature issue of everybody who ran in 2016. This is a signature issue of the Congress, and it's going to be a test of our majorities, another test. But let me say this, Democrats have been in favor of the wall before they were against it. There is no doubt that we have a porous southern border as well as a northern border that needs attention, which this plan does. We have an interior immigration system that's broken. We don't know the people who have come here, who are staying here illegally. We don't have a handle on visas like we should. We don't base immigration policy that makes sense, letting extended families in. We should be having people come to America that we need and that we want. We should know the people that are here and their intentions. We should have secure borders. All of this, that the 70-point plan that the president has suggested, is a negotiation. It's a start of comprehensive immigration reform. We need it, and I think if Democrats act in good faith, we'll be able to get a bill I think that everybody can live with.
Do Democrats want secure borders, Joe?
I think everybody wants secure borders. The question, and I agree with Brad, look, that there's going to be, that this is the starting of the negotiation. I think it's typical of the Trump administration, of the president himself, to put, the hard line, this is, demands out there, knowing that it's going to move away from that and be able to claim success at the end. And hopefully there will be comes together in the House and the Senate that he can live with, because that's in the end the right question. I think there are people of good faith on both sides in the Senate and the House that can come to agreement about a number of these issues that Brad just outlined. The question is, if the wall's not in there, just let's take that one. If the funding's not in there for that, does the president veto the bill because he doesn't get the one, the one critical thing that he promised through the campaign, or does he sign it and fight for the wall in another way? I don't know the answer to that. I think that's the big question.
Brad, as you well know, Ronald Reagan signed a law that was supposed to end illegal immigration once and for all. Nothing has really changed in that arena. This president seems to be taking a different approach in the same way he is with North Korea, for instance.
There's no doubt. And look, Democrats and Republicans should be united on this. We have a system that is completely broken. We all agree on that. So the question is, how do we fix it? Now, when you talk about a wall, we're not talking about the wall as the only option, a fixed wall. We're talking about using technology and using other methods of natural borders to secure specifically the southern border. But this bill also contains actions to be taken on the northern border. So let's admit, and Joe, I think, will agree with me, the system is completely broken. Both border security, internal security, and visa security, as well as people who want to come here and work and live. So if it's broken, let's fix it. That's exactly why the American people elect our representatives, to get things done.
But trying to fix it is bringing all kinds of protests. We're going to have to leave it there. Brad, Joe, thank you both. We'll have you back again soon.
Good to be with you.
FBI agents again searching the home of the Las Vegas shooter, looking for clues to his motive. A week and a day after Stephen Paddock gunned down 58 innocent people from his high-rise hotel suite. Will Carr is live in Las Vegas. Will, what's the latest?
Melissa, this morning we're getting a chilling account of the moments that played out right after the final gunshot stopped firing. A small group of officers raced up to the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay, and once they made it inside of Stephen Paddock's room, they say they found power tools, a note with calculations that showed how he could maximize his shooting accuracy, and guns everywhere.
So many guns, so many magazines, stacks and stacks of magazines everywhere, just in suitcases, all neatly stacked against pillars that were in the room, all stacked up, rifles placed all throughout, all kinds of monitors and electrical equipment he had in there. It just looked like almost a gun store.
Paddock, who described himself as a quiet gambler who stayed up all night and slept during the day, set up surveillance cameras outside of his room. The responding officers now say they actually thought those were booby traps because they had wires hanging out. While the investigation continues, so do the touching memorials. Every hotel on the Strip dimmed its lights last night for 11 minutes at the exact time of the shooting last Sunday night. And listen to the state's lieutenant governor describe the outpouring of support.
Las Vegas is accustomed to taking care of all the visitors who come here and taking care of the world who comes here. And this week, the world has taken care of us and has comforted us and blessed us. I just say thank you again on behalf of a grateful city, a grateful state, and God bless you all.
And as an example of that, just a couple minutes ago, I saw a man drive up. He got out of his car. He pulled out a Bible and started praying for about 10 or 15 minutes. Just one example of the thousands we've seen in the past couple of days of so many people coming to pay their respects. Melissa.
Will Carr, thank you for that report.
Well, Vice President Mike Pence reignites the debate over protests during the national anthem ahead of NFL games. Pence and his wife walked out of a game after several players took a knee. Genuine protest or publicity stunt? Our media panel weighs in. And hundreds fleeing their homes in the face of a raging wildfire in California wine country. Why the fire chief calls this an unprecedented disaster.
Our fight to get people harm's way, heed the evacuation warnings, and get out.
Right now, out-of-control wildfires raging in California wine country, destroying homes and sending people running for safety. Firefighters working hard to tame the flames, scorching hundreds of acres in the Bay Area. Mandatory evacuations are in place for most of Napa and Sonoma counties. Look at those flames. Schools are closed today, and evacuation centers are being set up to shelter those ordered to leave.
Vice President Mike Pence walks out of an NFL game yesterday as the vice president and his wife stood for the national anthem at yesterday's Colts 49ers game. Several 49ers players took a knee. Pence left right after that and defended the walkout in a series of tweets saying, quote, "I left today's Colts game because POTUS and I will not dignify any event that disrespects our soldiers, our flag, or our national anthem. At a time when so many are inspiring our nation with their courage, resolve, and resilience, now more than ever, we should rally around our flag and everything that unites us." Let's bring in today's media panel. Joe Concha is a media reporter for The Hill. Judy Miller is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter and author, also a Fox News contributor. Thanks, both of you, for being here. Judy, to you first. You're a little suspicious, I guess, of the vice president's motives here.
Yes, I am. And I am because the press pool, those who accompanied the vice president out to Indianapolis for this game, was never even taken into the stadium. So they knew, the press knew, everyone knew that the vice president's appearance was going to be very brief there. Didn't even have time to buy a hot dog. Just wanted to make a political point at the taxpayers' expense, because this trip, according to all the reporting of these flights cost, was $250,000 round-trip airfare on the Air Force Two. That doesn't even count all of the people on the ground, the ambulance, security, everything that goes with something like this, just to make a point. And then the president president himself undermined his vice president's stance as a man of principle by saying, I ordered him to do it. So is a Vice President Pence a man of principle, or is he President Trump's terrier, his faithful burr? I mean, that's what this looks like. I think this is going to not help either the president or the vice president.
All right, Joe, but, you know, vice presidents and presidents make a lot of trips for symbolic purposes. And if the vice president was simply trying to show that, you know, rallying around the flag is important, what's wrong with that?
Well, first of all, I own a terrier, Judy. Okay, so I don't appreciate the analogy. West Highland.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll pick another breed.
Okay. Yeah, this cost about $250,000, as you said, just to start. Here's the thing, though. During the previous president's tenure of 8 years, he did hundreds of fundraisers all across the country at taxpayers' expense, and we didn't really talk about that all that much. So if Pence did this for political purposes, okay, that's been done before, so we really shouldn't be upset about that. And by the way, I like how, you know, when NFL players kneel, that's them exercising their First Amendment rights. But when the vice president protests the protests and walks out, it's called, and this is what 49ers safety Eric Reed said, systemic oppression. Oh, I didn't realize it worked that way, John.
Yeah. Judy, I mean, the team, the 49ers, could have ended the whole thing by simply not taking a knee. I mean, haven't they made their point by now?
Well, they have made their point, and they're also adjusting the way in which they choose to demonstrate their cause, which is, you know, to protest racial inequality in this country. They're changing their tactics because they understand some Americans are offended by it. But look, this is the administration, and Joe, you know this, that promised to drain the swamp. But what is the swamp other than taking flights like this at the taxpayers' expense? It does have this useful function for them, and that is it distracts the American people from all of the things President Trump promised he was going to do and hasn't done for the American people. It is a very useful distraction, but other than that, I don't think it serves the public's interest.
Well, you know, it was supposed to. He's obviously the former governor of Indiana. It was a Colts game, Joe. Peyton Manning's Colts jersey was going to be retired. There's a legitimate reason for him to go to that game. And, you know, according to his tweets and the president's as well, there was a legitimate reason for him to walk out if he didn't like the kneeling.
Yeah, this wasn't just any Colts 49ers game. This was Peyton Manning being honored, not just with his jersey being retired, but also a statue outside there as well. And Peyton Manning perhaps is the most popular figure ever to emerge from Indiana, at least in modern times. Won them.
Larry Bird might argue with that, but
yeah, that's a very good point. Let's say most popular football player of all time. Yeah, I'm going to play that one safe. Good point on Bird. But look, here's the thing: these protests are hurting this league like we've never seen before. Winston Group comes out with a poll today, and it turns out that only 42% of men between the ages of 35 and 54 now see the NFL favorably. You say 42%, that's not bad. You know where that number was in August? 73%. It's dropped 31% in a matter of months, and the only thing you could look at is these protests are hurting the image of the league because it looks like they're disrespecting the flag, veterans, even if that isn't the purpose. That's how people mostly are seeing it.
These players ought to look up the Major League Baseball strike and see, you know, what kind of effect that had on the league back in the day. All right, good discussion. Joe Concha, Judy Miller, thank you both.
Thank you.
It's on again, off again, now on again. We are talking about health care again. Will President Trump use his pen to dismantle parts of Obamacare? Plus, inside the mind of a killer, what led this man to gun down 58 people at a concert, people he presumably didn't even know? What we're learning about Stephen Paddock. Right now, investigators are still working to figure out a motive a week after the Las Vegas massacre. What drove Stephen Paddock to open fire on a country music concert, killing 58 people? We are learning more about the man who was a high-stakes gambler and a frequent guest at Vegas casinos.
He's been staying in Las Vegas since '06. So we're talking about 11 years with his girlfriend, or at least in recent years, frequent visitor once or twice a month to this hotel and others. The most vanilla profile one could possibly imagine. A modest gambler, at least by our standards, you know, nothing serious, paid promptly, never owed any money anywhere in Las Vegas. He didn't fit the profile of a problem or a compulsive gambler.
Joining me now is Dave Couverture. He is a retired FBI special agent and crime prevention consultant. What jumps out at you from that description that we just heard?
Well, I can tell you that right now we have an individual that was very much into planning, very methodical, very intelligent, but he had certain issues. And when we're looking at today, as a crime prevention consultant, I've been following this matter and trying to conduct my own side investigation with, you know, based on the information that is publicly available, obviously. And it definitely looks like we have a situation here that, although it is or appears to be a domestic terror act, we definitely have an active shooter situation here, which was basically anticipated, and the indicators in his life were there to actually carry out something like this.
So you're saying people around him should have known?
Absolutely, or at least been able to identify that he was getting worse from a mental state, maybe even a physical capacity. Health-wise, he's getting older. And when I started reviewing a lot of the comments and information that people that knew him, whether it be family members, neighbors, or friends, it was, the indicators were there. So he got to a certain point where he thought it was time to do something like this, and there are a lot of different situations.
When we heard from last night on 60 Minutes, you know, the officers that were there, a lot of the details were very bizarre and almost unique to some of the situations that we have seen lately based on how methodical it was. Listen to what they had to say.
I took my boots off and just threw them in the casino, and it was slowing me down. I was faster barefoot, and I was going to be more effective barefoot.
We're told that security is taking fire from a suspect on the 29th floor, and that we had other officers that were identifying the suspect was in a room on the 32nd floor. So we're thinking multiple shooters at this point. He had screwed shut the door with a piece of metal and some screws.
Because he knew we'd be coming out that door to gain entry into his door. So he tried to barricade it as best he could. But thankfully, Levi had a pry bar and was able to easily pop that door.
That's amazing. He screwed the door shut. They also said that he had so much ammunition and so many weapons stacked against the columns all around the room that it looked like a gun shop. What do you make of those details?
Again, he was actually doing what he's done in the past from my readings and studying his background. He was actually organizing to make sure that he won. He was hedging his risk-taking factors. He's a gambler. He's indicated that type of behavior throughout his entire life, and he always excelled at what he was doing. He was very precise in his planning and looking ahead, looking over the horizon.
We only have a couple seconds left.
Attacks.
What do you make then? What do you deduce was his motive? I mean, what inspired him?
Well, right now, without having access to the specific information that the FBI has or the Sheriff's Office, but based on what's publicly available, to me, what I suspect, or the final outcome here, is that his actions are going to be based on psychosis, and then what we're going to be looking at is what actually triggered the event for him to actually carry this out. And that's what I think the law enforcement experts are going to be looking at in the very near, and that's what the challenge is.
Yeah, wow. Dave Couverture, thank you for your insight today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, President Trump getting ready to take executive action on Obamacare, what he plans to do, and the potential political impact. Our panel weighs in.
President Trump expected to sign an executive order to ease some insurance rules for Obamacare. The Wall Street Journal reports that it would benefit people who buy their own insurance or work for a small business. President Trump has said in the past that allowing people to buy coverage across state lines would drive down insurance premiums. Republicans failed to repeal and replace Obamacare several times, which may not leave him many other options.
If we take him at his word, the president really has two paths forward. One is reforming Obamacare through executive action, which is the option I refer to as going to be incredibly painful for everybody involved. He can also try and cut a deal with DEMS. I think the president is showing this past week, that he's trying to pursue both those options at once. I mean, maybe he'll forge a certain degree of success with congressional Democrats on this, but he's not going to get a deal that's going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Whatever way we look at this going forward, because of the Republicans' failure to get this done for the president, it's going to be painful for him.
Radio talk show host and Fox News contributor Richard Fowler is here. Also is Rasmussen Report's political analyst, Amy Holmes. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Amy, let me start with you. What do you think of that assessment, that maybe he's trying to do both?
I think that yes, I think it sounds about right, and that Republicans did have the opportunity with holding the House and the Senate and the White House to repeal and replace, and they didn't. And Melissa, there is the cynical side of me, having worked in Washington, that I think Republicans are perfectly happy to shift this responsibility to the president, and if they wanted some bipartisan cover, they weren't going to get it, so they weren't going to pass repeal and replace, because let's face it, any fixes to Obamacare, there is going to be pain. There are going to be trade-offs, and I think Republicans didn't want to be stuck with that.
Richard, that sounds pretty accurate. I mean, it seems like the Republicans have let him down, so he's like, well, we'll do a combination of executive orders, and, you know, I'll pick up the phone and dial the Democrats and see where they are and try and get something going.
I mean, I think that is right. He'll call his good friends Chuck and Nancy and try to get a deal.
I was going to let you say it instead of me. I'm glad you picked up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, right? And here's the thing, though, and I think here's the problem for this president, is trying to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, you know, by a million paper cuts, which is by executive order, by executive order, by executive order. It was Jillian's right in the opening thought there, is it's going to hurt the American people, right? We saw last week they rolled back some of the protections that were put in place for contraception, and what we found, what the data shows, is that since we've had the Affordable Care Act in place, we've seen abortions go down, we've seen the rate of teenage pregnancy go down, all because individuals are getting access to contraception. So when you take this piecemeal, it's not going to work. So the best deal.
I'm not going to debate your data there, because I think a lot of people would disagree with that data. But Amy, I mean, the bottom line here is it's going to be painful no matter what. And people at home, even if it stays the exact way it is, it's failing. I don't think people at home are going to separate who's to blame and who's not. When their health insurance doesn't work and they're not getting the health care and they're paying a fortune or all those outcomes, they're going to blame everyone who's in office. No one is safe. What do you think about that?
Right. I think that's exactly right, Melissa. And obviously the status quo is untenable. Even Democrats admit that. And that's partly why you had so many executive orders during the Obama administration, was because the Affordable Health Care Act was not affordable. And some of these executive orders were making that even worse. But I think we need to redefine some of our terms here. That what Democrats call essential benefits, a lot of Americans say, no, it's just making my plan more expensive. If I'm a 60-year-old woman, I don't need contraceptive coverage. Why should that be required in a health plan that only increases my premium rates? You're seeing this across the board, and of course, health insurers that are dropping out of markets, leaving Americans with either one provider or one option or none. So something needs to change. As I say, there will be trade-offs, and that's, you know, that's just part of how complicated 1/6 of our economy is.
Okay, but Richard, I mean, the reason why somebody who's 60 is paying for birth control is she's paying for someone else's birth control. Is how the whole plan worked.
Well, I mean, beyond that, I mean, that's what insurance has always been, right? Health insurance is you pay. Not the little
cheap things. It's for Richard. You're right.
Wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Insurance
Richard,
has been about insuring against risk, right? That's why the insurance market is created, whether it's car insurance, life insurance, house insurance, health insurance.
And
right. So with that,
wait a minute.
Let him finish.
But with that being said, the essential benefits also allow that 60-year-old woman to get a mammogram, and I'm pretty sure she needs one of those, like every woman should have, right? So when we talk about these essential benefits, it's to be very clear that they benefit the entire marketplace and they insure the entire market pool against risk, and that way we see an overall decrease in cost of health care over time, not individual premiums over the entire marketplace.
No. Yeah,
but with that being said, let's be very clear.
Amy's got to get in one more word. Amy, go ahead.
Well, actually, we're not seeing a decrease in health costs. We're seeing an increase in health costs, and we're also seeing an increase in premiums and plans being dropped and people not having access to them. And that's, you know, one of the complications about health care insurance is the cross-subsidization, what's fair, what's not fair, and I think all of this should be on the table.
Yeah, all that. Okay, we got to go. Thanks to both of you for a lively debate. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Against that backdrop, this Fox News alert, you might remember the Graham-Cassidy bill that was supposed to repeal and replace parts of Obamacare. Well, now President Trump and Senator Lindsey Graham, the co-author of that piece of legislation that did not ultimately succeed, are headed together to an unknown destination. What's this all about? Well, it might have something to do with what Melissa and the panel were just talking about.
Yeah.
So at a time when the president is battling other Republican senators, Bob Corker among them, Lindsey Graham is flying off with the president to an unknown destination. We'll find out more and let you know. Crews cleaning up after Nate swept through the South. Why some people are breathing a sigh of relief as they survey the damage. And the escalating nuclear standoff with North Korea raising concerns in Congress. A former national security advisor weighs in, coming up.
There is no viable military option. I mean, it would be horrific, and I don't think anybody wants to contemplate that. So we have to, we must get China recognizing that they've got to get fully engaged.
New information coming in as crews begin cleaning up after Hurricane Nate. Nate hit the Gulf Coast as a Category 1 hurricane Saturday night. The storm slammed the region with severe flooding and storm surge. Cleanup crews now say the damage is not nearly as catastrophic as other recent hurricanes, but thousands are still without power as Nate heads north as a tropical depression.
Breaking now in our showdown with North Korea, with Kim Jong-un now vowing to build up his country's nuclear arsenal amid new hints that the U.S. might be leaning toward military action. President Trump tweeting, quote, "Our country has been unsuccessfully dealing with North Korea for 25 years, giving billions of dollars and getting nothing. Policy didn't work." Joining us now, Megan O'Sullivan, a Harvard professor and former deputy national security advisor. She's also the author of Windfall: How the New Energy Abundance Upends Global Politics and Strengthens America's Power. So when it comes to North Korea, I was astounded to read in the Wall Street Journal the list of sanctions that are being put into place on North Korea by the U.S. Mexico, Peru, Spain, Kuwait all expelled their ambassador, the North Korean ambassadors from those countries, for instance.
Exactly. And this, I think, is a story that deserves more attention than it's getting. Obviously, the rhetoric between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump kind of engulfs the headlines. But what's really happening, which is of great interest, is this intensifying campaign to have countries, not just the U.S., cut off economic and diplomatic ties to North Korea. So this is putting in place a sanctions regime, an isolation regime against North Koreans that is unlike anything we've seen in decades.
And but because precisely that, because it is unlike anything we've seen, it's done a chance. I mean, does it perhaps pose the possibility that Kim Jong-un will finally be starved of the foreign currency he needs to keep that regime operating?
Well, I think it for sure will constrain the resources available to him. And one goal that we know it can meet. The real question is, will it affect his calculations about his nuclear program? And this, I think the president in another tweet was, right to be skeptical that a diplomatic solution is going to offer deliverance from this particular immediately. But I think it's really important to keep the diplomatic option on the table, in part because it's really essential in this other campaign to get countries to cut their ties. They need to know that the United States has some kind of strategy, and preferably one which isn't all about military force. So keeping the diplomatic option on the table, not dismissing it, as the president did, is very important to culminating this economic strangulation of the North Korean regime.
But Kim Jong-un has looked at people like Muammar Gaddafi, who gave up nuclear weapons, and Kim has said, look, it didn't work for him, didn't help him. I'm going to maintain a nuclear arsenal no matter what. If that's his attitude, what chance does economic strangulation really have?
Well, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is that economic sanctions never look like they're working until they actually produce a result. So there are many people who are very skeptical that Iran was going to negotiate with any amount of seriousness, and it was the economic pressure that really changed their politics and moved them to the negotiating table. Now, I think it would be overly optimistic to assume that any amount of economic pressure could get Kim Jong-un to simply say, I'm giving up this whole pursuit, for the reasons you suggested. This is existential to him in a lot of ways. But there are other compromises that he might make that, in combination with a strong military deterrent and a lot of other complements, could be a superior outcome to a military option, which would almost certainly run the risk of potentially hundreds of thousands of deaths in the region, if not further afield.
Well, the president certainly is keeping the U.S. press guessing when he tweets or when he mentions things like he did at that dinner for his top military leaders, said this is the calm before the storm. And when everybody pressed him for answers, he said, you'll find out. Does that kind of guesswork, does that have to apply to the North Koreans too? I mean, are they left wondering how serious he is about military action, and is that a good thing?